I never imagined my life would split in half inside a department store fitting room, under harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel colder than it already was. I remember the exact sound the curtain made when I pulled it shut, this soft metallic rattle like a warning I didn't hear in time. I had chosen a navy dress for our anniversary dinner, something simple and elegant, something I hoped would make Mark look at me the way he used to, before the distance, before the excuses, before the constant hum of secrets that I tried so hard to ignore. I slipped into the dress, smoothing the fabric over my hips, and for one moment I actually felt hopeful. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe we'd find our way back to each other. But then I heard footsteps just outside the curtain, a whisper of movement, and before I could even turn around, his voice cut through the thin barrier like a knife. "She didn't notice," Mark whispered, his tone low, rushed, almost excited. "The loan went through." My heart stopped, literally stopped, the way you see in movies when everything freezes for one impossible second. I held my breath because I knew instinctively he wasn't talking about some harmless loan for a new car or a house repair. There was something sharp in his voice, something sneaky, something that curled around my spine like ice. And then another voice responded, a woman, soft, confident, too familiar. "Good," she said, almost giggling. "Now we can move forward. She won't know until it's too late." The blood drained from my face so fast I grabbed the wall to steady myself. My husband wasn't alone, and he wasn't whispering to a teller or an agent. He was whispering to another woman. I tried to stay still, keep breathing, keep thinking, but my mind was unravelling like a broken thread. Loan? Move forward? Too late? What loan? What had he done behind my back? And why was he celebrating it with someone else? I leaned closer, careful not to rustle the curtain. They were right outside. Their shadows brushed against the floor, blending for a split second, and my stomach twisted. "She's so naive," the woman murmured. "You said she barely checks the bank statements anymore." "She doesn't," Mark replied. "She trusts me. That's why this works." I almost sank to the floor. Trust, the one thing I gave him without question, the one thing he was apparently counting on to destroy me. My hands shook so violently that the hanger clattered against the wall, and I pressed my palm over my mouth to keep myself from making another sound. I stared at my reflection, and for the first time I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked like someone living in a stranger's life, someone blind, someone foolish. I wanted to burst out of the fitting room, confront him, demand answers, scream, cry, anything. But my body refused to move. Their voices drifted again, softer now, like they were walking away. "Once it's processed," Mark said. "We'll have enough to start fresh, just the two of us." The two of us. The words echoed like a punch to the chest. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a life together, a life funded by what? My savings? Our mortgage? A loan in my name? My breath hitched as the possibility formed fully in my mind. Had he used my identity? My credit? My future? I stood frozen in that fitting room long after their footsteps faded, long after my heartbeat slowed enough for me to breathe again. I changed back into my clothes mechanically, my hands numb and clumsy. The dress pooled at my feet like a discarded dream, and for a moment I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I felt this strange, expanding hollowness inside me, like something vital had been scooped out. When I finally stepped out, the store felt different, tilted, like the world had shifted on its axis without warning. I scanned the aisles, but Mark was nowhere in sight. Neither was she. I didn't know who she was yet, but I would find out. I walked toward the register slowly, pretending to be normal, pretending nothing had ripped through my life minutes earlier. Every step felt staged, like I was acting in someone else's body. When I reached the front door, the warm summer air hit me hard, carrying the distant sound of traffic, laughter, life, everything that felt suddenly unreachable to me. Mark stood outside near the parking lot, looking down at his phone, his expression calm, casual, like he hadn't just shattered our marriage with one whispered sentence. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled, actually smiled, and I realised then that whatever lie he was living, he was fully committed to it. "Hey babe," he said easily. "You done already?" I nodded because my voice was stuck somewhere deep in my chest. His eyes searched mine briefly, maybe sensing something, maybe not. But he didn't ask. He didn't care enough to. As we walked to the car, I stared at him, memorising every line on his face, every gesture, every careless word. Because I knew something he didn't. The woman he thought was naive, blind, obedient, she had woken up in that fitting room, and she would not stay silent, not this time, not ever again. The drive home felt like being trapped inside a slow-moving nightmare, the kind where everything looks familiar, but nothing feels right. Mark talked the whole way, filling the car with meaningless chatter about work, dinner plans, weekend errands, words that felt like static scraping against my skin. I nodded at the right moments, pretending to listen, pretending to be the same woman he thought he could manipulate forever. But inside, a storm was forming, cold, sharp, and focused. Every time he laughed, every time he flashed that easy smile, the betrayal dug deeper, reshaping something inside me. By the time we pulled into our driveway, my chest felt heavy, packed with questions I couldn't, yet unpack. The house looked exactly the same, warm porch lights glowing, the flowers I planted blooming, everything perfect on the outside, just like us used to be. But now the home felt tainted, like I was walking into a crime scene where the victim was me. Mark tossed his keys onto the counter and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind. I stiffened. The touch felt wrong, foreign, like a stranger's hands. "You okay?" he asked casually, kissing the side of my neck. "You seem quiet." I forced a smile he couldn't see. "Just tired," I whispered, praying he wouldn't hear the tremor in my voice. He nodded, satisfied, unaware that I had heard every word he thought I never would. While he went upstairs to shower, I stayed in the kitchen, gripping the granite counter until my knuckles turned white. I tried to reason with myself, to breathe, to not let panic take over, but my mind was racing with possibilities. What loan had gone through? What documents had he used? What had he signed in my name? I opened my banking app with shaking fingers. Everything looked normal at first glance. No large withdrawals, no new accounts. But that didn't calm me. It terrified me more. Whatever they were doing wasn't happening here. It was somewhere deeper, somewhere I hadn't thought to look. I pulled up our home computer and logged into our joint credit files, then my individual ones. And that's when the first wave of shock hit. A new loan inquiry appeared under my name, timestamped 2 weeks ago. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred, my ears burning, my chest tightening. It wasn't approved yet, but it was real. He had used my identity. He had taken my trust and weaponized it. My knees weakened and I gripped the chair to steady myself. 2 weeks ago. That was around the time he started bringing his phone into the bathroom, taking late-night calls outside, guarding his laptop like it held national secrets. I thought he was stressed from work. I thought he needed space. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. But the truth was uglier. He wasn't drifting. He was plotting. And I had been sleeping beside him every night, oblivious to the knife he was sharpening behind my back. Suddenly, the stairs creaked. I slammed the laptop shut and forced my breathing to slow. Mark walked into the kitchen, towel around his shoulders, hair damp, smelling like soap and betrayal. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again, watching me more closely now. I turned, leaned against the counter, and smiled just enough. "Yeah," I said softly, "just hungry." That seemed to settle him. The fact that he believed me so easily made something inside me harden, crystallize into resolve. After dinner, he fell asleep quickly, like a man with nothing on his conscience. I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of his deceit pressing down on me. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, innocent in its rhythm, and wondered how many nights he had lied here preparing to replace me. Around midnight, I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I turned on the small lamp in the living room and opened his laptop. He always bragged about how secure he kept his passwords, but after 8 years together, I knew his patterns like my own reflection. I cracked it in minutes. My heart stuttered as the screen lit up. Emails, contracts, messages between him and the woman, including pictures of them smiling, pictures of their hotel room, pictures of them planning a future I wasn't part of. There were documents too, loan applications, forged signatures, copies of my ID I never handed him. He scanned them while I was asleep. He used my credit, my name, my life as stepping stones into a future with someone else. The room spun for a moment, and I grabbed the edge of the couch to steady myself. But then the spinning stopped. Something inside me locked into place. Calm, cold, controlled. I took pictures of everything with my phone, every email, every document, every proof of betrayal. He had taken so much from me, but he had given me the one thing he never meant to: evidence. When I finally closed the laptop, the clock read 3:17 a.m. I walked back upstairs, slid into bed beside the man who had been sleeping peacefully while plotting my ruin. I lay there quietly, staring into the dark, feeling my heartbeat steady itself. He thought I was naive. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I wouldn't fight back. But he had no idea what kind of woman he had turned me into in that fitting room. And soon he would learn exactly how dangerous a woman becomes when she stops trusting the wrong person. Morning came too quickly, dragging sunlight across the room like an unwelcome truth. I barely slept, though I kept my breathing slow and steady so Mark wouldn't sense the shift inside me. When he finally stirred beside me, stretching lazily like a man who believed the universe still belonged to him, I kept my eyes half closed, pretending to wake at the same moment. "You were out cold last night," he said, brushing his hand over my shoulder. The touch made my stomach twist. I forced a soft laugh. Guess I needed it. He smiled, kissed my cheek, and pulled himself out of bed, completely unaware that the woman lying next to him had spent the night gathering enough evidence to blow his carefully constructed secret life to pieces. While he showered, I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, letting the weight of everything settle into place. He had betrayed me financially, emotionally, spiritually, and yet he moved around the house humming softly, packing his laptop for work, sipping his coffee like nothing in his world was wrong. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, studying every gesture, every expression, trying to understand how a man could be so casual after planning to ruin the person who trusted him the most. "I'll be home late," he said, grabbing his jacket. "We have a client thing tonight." I nodded, pretending not to notice how he avoided my eyes. "Fine," I said calmly. The word tasted metallic in my mouth. He leaned in to kiss me, and it took everything in me not to recoil. When the door finally shut behind him, the silence felt electric. For the first time in hours, I let myself exhale fully. My hands trembled just enough to make my mug rattle against the counter. I set it down quickly. There was no time for fear now. I opened my phone and stared at the folder of screenshots, emails, forged documents, proof of identity theft, and messages between Mark and the woman. Her name was Alicia. She had signed one message with a heart next to her name, writing, "Can't wait until everything is final." My fingers tightened around the phone. Everything is final. In their minds, I was already gone. Replaced, erased, not today. I spent the next hour writing down every detail I remembered, every timeline, every date, cross-checking everything with the bank statements, credit reports, and loan inquiry notes. The more I learned, the deeper the betrayal cut. He had applied for a $70,000 personal loan using my identity. He had forged my signature so perfectly it made me nauseous, thinking how many times he must have practiced. He wasn't sloppy, he wasn't impulsive, he was calculated, and that made him far more dangerous. I knew I couldn't go to the bank unprepared. If I marched in blindly, Mark could twist the story, or worse, get ahead of me. So I saved everything in 3 places: my phone, a USB drive, and an email draft sent to myself. I wasn't giving him a single chance to rewrite history. Around noon, I sat down with my laptop and researched identity theft, spousal fraud, financial abuse, terms I never thought I'd be Googling about my own husband. The more I read, the more the pit in my stomach tightened. Women like me lost everything every day because they trusted the wrong person. But I refused to become another statistic buried in a legal document. I wasn't letting Mark walk away clean, not when he had planned to build a new life with another woman using the money he stole from mine. I could feel anger pushing through the fear now, hot and steady, giving me a clarity I hadn't felt in years. By mid-afternoon, I had a plan. First, I called the bank's fraud department. I used a calm voice, polite but firm, telling them I had reason to believe someone had submitted a loan application using my name without my authorization. The representative asked me questions, verification, timestamps, security details, and with each answer, my confidence solidified. She put me on hold briefly, then returned with a tone that shifted from routine politeness to something more alert. "Yes," she said. "There was an application submitted recently. If you did not authorize it, we need you to come in immediately to file a report." I thanked her, hung up, and felt tears burn behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being seen, not by Mark, not by the world, but by myself. I grabbed my purse, slid the USB drive into the inner pocket, and drove to the bank with my jaw clenched, my heartbeat steady. The sky looked grey, weighed down by clouds that hung low, matching the heaviness in my chest. At the bank, the fraud officer, a woman named Karen, listened carefully as I explained what I knew. I kept my voice even, letting the facts speak for themselves, even as my hands trembled. When I showed her the screenshots, she tightened her lips. "You did the right thing coming in," she said. "We'll freeze the application and launch an internal investigation. You might also want to file a police report." Police. The word made my stomach jolt. The idea of dragging my marriage into the legal system felt surreal, overwhelming. But then I remembered Alicia's voice whispering, "Now we can move forward." They weren't stopping for me. They weren't hesitating. Why should I? When I stepped out of the bank, the air felt colder, but I felt stronger, more awake. My life might have been tilting off its axis, but I was no longer falling helplessly. I was steering. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I parked at a quiet overlook near the river and stared at the water, dark and rippling under the weight of the wind. I thought about every moment Mark had lied to me in the past month, every touch, every kiss, every time he looked me in the eyes without guilt. How long had he been planning our end, and why did he believe I would go down quietly? I sat there until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and grey. And in that fading light I made myself a promise. I would not let him destroy me. I would not let his betrayal define me. The war he started in the fitting room, I was going to finish it. By the time I finally drove home, the sky was dark, and the streetlights were flickering on one by one, casting long shadows across the pavement. Every part of me felt drained, but beneath the exhaustion was a sharp steadiness, like steel forming under pressure. I wasn't the same woman who walked into that fitting room. I wasn't even the same woman who woke up this morning beside a liar. When I stepped through the front door, the house was silent. Too silent. And for a moment I thought Mark had come home early. But the lights were off, his shoes weren't by the door, and the air didn't carry his usual cologne. I exhaled slowly and set my bag down, letting the quiet settle over me like armour. I walked into the living room and turned on a single lamp, watching the warm glow spill across the space where we had built a life together. Movie nights, holiday mornings, birthdays, arguments, reconciliations. Now all of it felt like a set from a play I no longer believed in. My phone buzzed suddenly, slicing through the silence. A text from Mark. "Running later than I thought. Don't wait up." My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from certainty. He wasn't at a client meeting. He was with her, with Alicia, planning, celebrating, living a future they thought I was too blind to see. I stared at the message and let the truth sink deeper. The man who vowed to protect me was the same man trying to erase me. I needed to stay a step ahead. I opened my laptop and organised everything I had collected. Screenshots arranged chronologically, emails labelled, contracts filed. I wanted a trail so clear even a blind attorney could follow it. The more evidence I gathered, the more surreal it became. He wasn't just cheating, he wasn't just lying. He was dismantling my life piece by piece, as though our marriage was a temporary inconvenience on his path to something shinier. Somewhere around 9, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart slammed against my ribs. I shut the laptop, slid it under the couch cushion, and forced my breathing to slow. The door opened, and Mark stepped inside, smelling like expensive cologne and guilt poorly disguised as confidence. He looked tired, but in the way someone looks after a night of doing exactly what they wanted. "Hey," he said casually, tossing his jacket over a chair. "You're still up?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." He nodded, stretching his neck like he'd been tense for hours. "Long day." "Clients?" I asked, pretending I didn't already know the answer. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Big account, lots to go over." I wondered if he ever realised how easily he lied, how smooth it came to him, how effortlessly he expected me to believe anything he said. "Did you eat?" I asked, my voice soft enough to sound sincere. "Yeah, grabbed something with the team." Another lie. I could picture him with Alicia, the two of them leaning close, whispering about the money they expected to steal, convinced I'd never catch on. The thought made something hot and dangerous coil in my chest. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and grabbed a water bottle. I watched him quietly, studying him with a detachment that felt unnervingly calm. He had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. "I'm exhausted," he said with a yawn. "Mind if we talk tomorrow? I just want to crash." "Sure," I said softly. Tomorrow. He wanted tomorrow. He believed he'd still have control tomorrow. It was almost insulting. He walked upstairs, and I listened to every step, every creak in the floorboards. A small part of me wondered how many nights I had waited like this, oblivious to what he was doing, trusting blindly. Never again. When the bedroom door shut, I waited 5 full minutes before moving again, my body buzzing with a mix of fear and determination. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside onto the back porch where the cold night air hit me like a slap, waking my senses. I dialed the non-emergency police line, my fingers trembling but steadying as soon as the operator answered. I explained the situation calmly. Suspected identity theft by a spouse, fraudulent loan application, forged documents. The woman on the other end listened carefully, then told me exactly what I needed to do. File an official report at the station first thing in the morning. "Bring all your evidence," she added, "and bring someone with you if you can. These cases can get intense." Intense. She didn't know the half of it. When I hung up, I stared into the dark yard, letting the cold settle into my lungs. I wasn't afraid of the night. I was afraid of the man sleeping upstairs, the one who believed he owned the script to my life. I walked back inside and locked every door, checked every window, not because I feared an intruder, but because I feared the moment he realised I wasn't his quiet shadow anymore. He would sense the shift eventually. He would fight to keep control. Men like Mark didn't crumble quietly, but I wasn't crumbling either. When I finally went upstairs, he was already asleep, sprawled across the bed like someone with nothing to lose. I slipped under the covers as quietly as possible, lying stiffly on my side, staring at the wall. For a moment, my hand brushed the empty space between us, the space where 8 years of love used to live, and in that silence, something inside me shattered for good. Not my hope, not my strength, just the last piece of the woman who ever believed he deserved me. I closed my eyes and made a silent promise to myself. Tomorrow, I would stop surviving quietly. Tomorrow, the war would begin in daylight. Morning came like a blade, sharp, bright, unforgiving. I woke before Mark did, lying there in the cold silence, staring at the ceiling while my heartbeat pulsed steadily against the pillow. I could hear his breathing beside me, deep, rhythmic, careless, the breathing of a man who still believed he was winning. I slipped out of bed quietly, every movement practiced, controlled. I dressed quickly, choosing a plain sweater and jeans, something neutral, something that wouldn't draw questions if anyone saw me. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a different woman than the one who stood there yesterday. Her eyes were harder, steadier, with a focus sharpened by betrayal. I didn't feel weak anymore. I felt dangerous. Downstairs, the house was cold and dim, and I let it stay that way. I made coffee without turning on a single light, the sound of the machine humming low in the quiet kitchen. As I sipped the steaming mug, I checked the folder on my phone again. Screenshots, timestamps, contracts, emails, hotel receipts, evidence, proof, armour. Every file was another nail in the coffin of the man sleeping upstairs. I glanced at the clock. 7:19 a.m. The police station opened at 8. I had planned everything down to the minute. Get there early, file the report, hand over the evidence, freeze every account he had access to, secure my credit, take back the life he tried to erase. I wasn't running from him anymore. I was running straight at the fire he set. Footsteps echoed above me, slow, groggy, careless. Mark was waking up. My jaw tightened. I braced myself. He came downstairs a minute later, rubbing the back of his neck and yawning like a man with nothing but normal worries. He smiled when he saw me, leaning down to brush my shoulder with a kiss. I forced myself not to flinch. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," I murmured. The lie felt strangely natural now. "I have a few errands to run." "Want to grab breakfast together?" he asked, opening the fridge. "Maybe talk about that trip we were planning." That trip, the one he never intended to take me on, the one he would have taken with Alicia once he drained every ounce of financial life out of me. My stomach twisted, but my voice stayed steady. "Can't today, maybe later." He shrugged, completely unbothered, and grabbed a carton of orange juice. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it quickly, too quickly, and turned it face down before I could see the screen. Alicia. Of course. The taste of bitterness spread across my tongue, but I stayed silent. Let him think I was still asleep to the truth. Let him think his plan was still intact. As he poured his drink, he said, "I'll be home late again. Another long day." Lie number 1 of the morning. "Okay," I whispered, sipping my coffee to hide the tightening in my jaw. "Be safe." He smiled again, kissed my cheek, grabbed his keys, and walked toward the door. "Love you," he said casually. I swallowed hard. "You too." And I realised something as the door shut behind him. I wasn't grieving anymore. I wasn't breaking. I wasn't drowning. I was angry, furiously, quietly, powerfully angry. And anger, I learned, is a weapon when you know how to aim it. I grabbed my purse, checked my phone, and headed out the door. The morning air was cold, the kind that creeps into your bones and settles there. But it made me feel alive, awake, ready. The drive to the station felt like moving through fog, everything outside blurring while my thoughts came into focus. When I walked inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the scent of disinfectant filled the air. The officer at the front desk, a woman with tired eyes and a steady voice, asked how she could help me. I told her everything. Not the story of a broken marriage or a cheating husband. Those were secondary wounds. I gave her the facts like armour lined up in a row: unauthorised loan application, forged signature, stolen documents, digital proof, intent to defraud. She listened without interrupting, her expression tightening the farther I went. When I handed her the USB drive, she nodded. "You did the right thing coming here," she said. "This is serious and will take immediate action." Immediate action, words I had needed to hear for days. After filing the report, she walked me through the next steps: protecting my credit, securing personal documents, potential charges, what to expect if the investigation escalated. Every word grounded me. Every instruction strengthened my resolve. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I was fighting for my life. When I walked out of the building, the sun was higher, the air warmer, and for a moment I let myself breathe. Really breathe. I wasn't free yet, but I was no longer imprisoned by his lies. I sat in my car for a full minute, staring at the steering wheel, letting the enormity of everything settle. And then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 4 words. "He knows. Be careful." My breath stopped. My fingers numbed. My heart pounded. I read it again, the world narrowing to those 4 words. "He knows. Be careful." My entire body went cold. Someone had told him. Someone had warned me. Someone was watching. And suddenly, the war I thought I was starting alone felt much bigger than I expected. Much darker. Much more dangerous. I looked around the parking lot, scanning every car, every window, every shadow. Because if Mark knew, then everything was about to change, and not in my favour. For a moment I couldn't move. Those 4 words clung to my skin like frost, sinking deeper, colder, heavier with every heartbeat. "He knows. Be careful." I stared at the phone as if the message might disappear, as if I might somehow will it into being a mistake. But the truth sat in my stomach like a stone. Someone had told him. Someone had warned me. Someone was close enough to know both sides of this war. My hands shook as I locked the screen and dropped the phone into my lap. The world outside my car felt suddenly hostile, like every shadow was holding its breath, waiting to see my next move. I forced myself to inhale, slow and steady, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I had 2 choices: panic or plan. I chose the second. I texted no one. I called no one. I didn't even look at the message again. If Mark knew I'd gone to the police, he would act fast, faster than I could predict. Men like him, when cornered, didn't apologise or retreat. They destroyed. I drove home on autopilot, eating up the miles with a hollow focus. Every car behind me felt suspicious. Every stoplight felt too long. Every glance in the rearview mirror sent a jolt through my spine. When I finally pulled into the driveway, something felt wrong immediately. The curtains in the living room were open. I never left them open. My breath caught in my throat. I unlocked the door slowly, stepping inside with the caution of someone entering a battlefield. The house was silent, suffocatingly still, but the stillness felt artificial, forced, like someone had pressed pause on the world. "Mark," I called out, my voice barely above. A whisper. No response. I walked deeper inside, each step making my heartbeat hammer harder. The living room looked normal, too normal. The couch cushions were perfectly arranged. The lamp was off. The TV remote was centred on the table, like it had been placed there with intention. I moved to the kitchen. Everything was clean, untouched. But when I opened the fridge, a half-eaten takeout container sat on the top shelf. Something I hadn't bought, something he must have brought home. He had been here. Recently. I felt him in the air, in the walls, in the silence. I checked the hallway, then the bedroom, then the bathroom. Nothing. My chest tightened when I reached our office, the room where I found so much of his betrayal. The door was closed. I hadn't closed it when I left. My hand hovered over the doorknob before I finally pushed it open. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the computer screen. The laptop was open, awake, waiting. My stomach dropped. On the screen was a single sentence typed in a blank document. "You should have stayed quiet." The breath punched out of my lungs as if someone had hit me. My heart thrashed in my chest, loud enough I swore the walls could hear it. I backed out of the room slowly, my fingers trembling uncontrollably, my eyes darting to every corner of the hallway like something might leap out at me. He had been here. He had typed that message. He wanted me to see it. He wanted me afraid. He succeeded. I grabbed my keys, ready to flee, ready to run anywhere that wasn't here. But before I could reach the door, another sound stopped me. A familiar buzzing. My phone. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Another message, same unknown number. "He's watching you." My entire body went cold. My vision blurred for a second, my breath stuttering. Watching me from where? Outside? Inside? Across the street? I forced myself to look out the front window through a slit in the curtain. Nothing, no people, no movement, no cars I recognised. But that meant nothing. Watching didn't require presence. Watching required intent. I took a step back and hit the table, making a loud clatter that echoed through the empty house. I had to get out. Now! I ran to the door, flung it open and hurried to my car, locking the doors as soon as I got inside. My hands hurt from shaking so hard as I turned the key and sped out of the driveway. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I drove until the houses disappeared, until the streets blurred, until the sky grew heavy with dusk. I finally pulled into the parking lot of a small gas station miles outside town. My chest heaved as I tried to calm myself, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my life. I checked my phone again, scrolling through the evidence, reassuring myself it was still there. This was no longer about anger. This was survival. I walked inside the gas station bathroom, locked the door, stared at myself in the mirror, and barely recognised the woman staring back. Pale, shaken, fierce, unbroken. I splashed cold water on my face, forcing myself to breathe. When I stepped back into my car, I made a decision that felt like drawing a line in blood. I drove straight to a hotel, paid in cash, used a fake name, and locked myself inside a room on the 3rd floor. Only then did I allow myself to collapse onto the bed, trembling from head to toe. Mark knew. Someone warned him. Someone warned me. And the game he started had turned into something darker than either of us expected. I stared at the ceiling, exhausted, scared, determined, and whispered to myself, "You're not done. You're not defeated. Fight smarter." Because war wasn't coming, war had already arrived, and I wasn't planning to lose.